Happy people are some of the most unempathetic motherfuckers on the face of this earth, and they put toxic positivity on full display. It's a kind of optimistic narcissism, if you will, where those who find life to be good put their ideology as a kind of belief system supremacy, and they force it down your throat. For example, if you are asked the question, "How are you?" and you give an honest reply, it is, "I am a existential discontent because I'm impoverished, I hate my job, and I am in a toxic relationship in which I cannot get out of." And their response to that will be something like this: "If you hate your job so much, why don't you just find a new one that pays better with a friendlier workplace environment? And if you hate your relationship, why don't you just either be happy being single or find a better partner?" And they don't realize that that type of invalidation and an over excess of evaluations are unwanted, unwarranted, and it's perceived as disrespectful. Because obviously, if he who suffers had the option to have something better, he or she would have figured it out. But, for example, all of the transactional interactions in the world of commerce that I have in my own local town, whether it be the gas station, of which I am a regular, or the diner, the coffee parlor, it's been roughly the same employees living that minimum wage nonsense for over a decade. Obviously, they don't love their job and they're dissatisfied with the amount of money that they make. Were it possible for them to improve their situation, they would have done so by now. But it's hard to get a job in this day and age that pays better, and you're lucky to get something shitty, if even that. And the quote, happy people, when they receive complaints from those who are otherwise, their attitude is thus: "Why are you projecting your misery upon the world? Don't you understand that you have to take some responsibility? Don't you understand that there is growth in suffering because it teaches you that you are worthy of something better, and you just have to have the confidence to go out there and take what's yours and stop being inferior." But here's the thing. These so-called happy people are really so because they are successful, but the reason why they are so is because statistically they just got lucky. Doors open for them, and they were able to take opportunities that the majority of people did not have available to them for whatever reason. And in that better position where they like their job and they get paid good money and they have a loving, loyal partner who is compatible with them, blah, blah, blah. They walk around with this attitude that if I can do it, why can't you? What they don't understand is that nobody chooses to suffer when it comes to the lot in life that they are bewailing. Some people, because of their situation, suffer from depression because they feel defeated. They feel as though they are a prisoner of their own life. They feel like they are in a nightmare situation with their waking consciousness where they hate every aspect of it, but no matter how hard they try, they just can't receive anything better. But yet, when it comes to the depressive, who oftentimes is inclined to suicidal ideation, they will tell you in the hotline on a search result that you are not alone. You need to communicate to people how you are feeling. And by you doing so, you will get the support that you need. But when you do that, the happy person will actually be disgusted with the inferiority of the depressive. For example, I opened up recently to my father in regards to my extreme depression because I was told, or in other words, I was lied to, that communication was how I would receive the support and the help that I need to prevent, unalivement. So, me and my father are sitting at a restaurant. I'm eating my food, I'm drinking my coffee, and I'm telling him that I'm depressed. And his response to me was, why don't you just put a fucking bullet in your head and get it over with already? And I was shocked. I was like, what the fuck? And he was being dead serious. And it was very hurtful. But I wanted to take this experiment to the next level, and keep in mind that I have felt this way for years, but it has gotten particularly worse as of late, as of the past year or so. So they said, call somebody. Tell a loved one what's going on. That's how you get the support that you need. So I called my brother. And it wasn't the first thing I brought up. But towards the end of the conversation, I told him that I was very depressed. And he told me that, Garrett, here's the sad truth. Nobody cares because you are in it alone. You have to keep that in mind. Your problems are your problems. We all have our problems. You have to get your shit together, and you have to just be a man and overcome this. Now, there's a lot of truth to that, but what really struck me the wrong way was when he said that nobody cares. In other words, nobody wants to hear your bullshit. And you are in it alone, as we all are. And I don't think that what he said was untrue, but I'm quite close with my brother, and I have never communicated to him directly to that extreme that I am as depressed as I am, and this is how I feel. I didn't say I wanted to unalive myself, but I said something similar. I said, I find it preferable. I would have found it preferable never to have been born. And how I feel right now, where it's so miserable to be alive, I just wish my life would end sometimes, which is basically the same thing. And it instantly made him uncomfortable. And like I said, he said, get your shit together. You're in it alone. I got my own problems. Basically, nobody fucking cares. So, I broke the number one ethic that I have lived by my whole life. And that is, don't give people your problems unless you know they want to hear them. And also, don't ask for advice. And in the same way, don't give other people unsolicited consultation. Don't invalidate others and don't evaluate for them. But at the same time, the reverse is true. Don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be invalidated when you make yourself vulnerable, and you're thereafter going to be evaluated for. But I did it as an experiment. And here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. They want you to believe that if you are a depressive and or wishing to unalive yourself, you need to communicate. You need to get the help that you need. You need the support of friends and family. But I come to find that when you tell people this, they're not able to relate with you, and they will actually become disgusted with your inferiority, and they will distance themselves from you. Not only that, but they will think that you're fucking crazy. You need to go see a psychiatrist. You need to get put on medication. You need to go to a psych ward. They look at you like the idea of somebody being so depressed that they don't like being alive is so out of the ordinary and such an anomaly, such profound mental illness, that you are not only a danger to yourself, but you're a danger to others, and you are therefore a liability. And you are somebody that is to be looked upon as ultimately dangerous, because if you're considered to be a danger to yourself or a danger to others, then you're just a danger in general. You are somebody who people are not going to want to be around. When you tell people that you're depressed or that you would consider it better to have never been born, or for your life not to continue with the condition that you're in and how miserable it is, they actually have a tendency to get pissed off with you. So I guess the point of this video is to let you know that, and it kills me to say this to you, but you are alone in this. And it is a kind of solipsistic misery. Not the philosophy of solipsism, where one is convinced that only their own mind is sure to exist and everything is just a projection thereof in this world. That's a mental illness. What I mean is a kind of simile solipsism, where your misery that belongs to you, the individual, is completely isolated. It is yours alone, and there is no other world outside of your misery. Solipsistic depression is your own isolated misery, where you are in a world where you are so confused as to why it is that you are the only one that feels this way. Why do I hate being alive? Why am I so depressed? Why do I wish I was never born? Why do I have the temptation to just fucking end it all, even though I'm probably not going to act upon it? Why is it that I feel this way? But when I talk to the people who are most close to you, in my case, my father and my older brother, they tell you, quote, just put a bullet in your head and get it over with already. Or, nobody cares, dude. I got my own fucking problems. You need to get your shit together. You're in this alone. It's like, what the fuck, man? You know, something similar happened to me with my ex-girlfriend, who I was in a relationship with for several years. I felt depression for the first time in like 2022. And she would become argumentative with me. And she would say, you're not the same. What the fuck is wrong with you? And I said, baby, I love you. It has nothing to do with you. I'm just having an existential crisis right now where I just feel mentally unwell on account of this depression. And shortly after that, and keep in mind, I wasn't being abusive or anything like that to her. Just my personality wasn't the same. I was unhappy, and she took it personal, and she thought that it had something to do with her doing something wrong, right? So eventually, she said, I don't want to sleep in the same bed with you. She refused to have sex with me when I made advances towards her, and that type of stuff. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And that just made the depression worse. And I told her that, listen, I'm fucking depressed. My personality is changing because I feel dead on the inside, and I don't know why, and I want it to stop, but no matter how much I want it to stop, it doesn't. And her lizard brain, probably because of natural selection, where women want men to not only be healthy and good looking, but they need the man to be a protector, a source of guaranteed survival and betterment on their behalf. And when you feel depressed, you temporarily at least are not able to provide that, but they have a tendency to be unsupportive because their instincts say that you are not able to survive well. Therefore, I cannot trust you to be a provider, to be a protector, and therefore, I must find somebody who will. When you are depressed, women have a tendency to become disgusted with you, to become argumentative with you, to refuse to have sex with you, and eventually break up with you. I've experienced it several times in the past, because now my depression is permanent, but there used to be a time where it was a on and off thing to the point where I thought I had like bipolar or something. But I realized that I never had bipolar. I just had, say, weeks where I felt depressed, and then I would just snap out of it and I'd be back to my old content self. But even though it was only a couple weeks, like it was detrimental to my relationships. Because, like I said, we would start fighting and I would become outraged. I would say, how can you be so fucking selfish? Where I tell you that this is how I feel, whether I like it or not, but you're gonna be a nasty cunt towards me. You're gonna be a fucking bitch towards me about it, rather than be supportive. I don't get it. But I get it now. I think women in particular, they have a kind of reptilian complex in their psyche. That's the most primitive part of their brain. Men have it too. But it manifests different in women because women need their men to be strong and exuberant for the assurance of their survival. And when that becomes compromised due to a depressive disorder, even if it's only temporary, they just, from a genetic level, when it comes to just female nature in general, I guess, they become so turned off by your inferiority that they will just basically leave you for dead and go fuck somebody else. It's not the first time I experienced that. I remember the woman that I was with for a short period of time when my mother passed away. I made myself vulnerable and I cried and I mourned and this, that, and the other. And she was actually disgusted with the fact that I was mourning the death of my mother. And she said, "You need to get your fucking shit together. Okay? You have bills to pay. You can't keep drinking like this, man. You can't keep not going to work." And even though she had a good point as far as that was concerned, it's very traumatizing to deal with the death of a loved one, particularly one's mother. And I just found that she was very unsympathetic towards that situation. But anyway, the point is, society slash psychology will tell you you need to communicate to get the help that you need. You need the support of your loved ones. And when you're in a position where you're so desperate that you're willing to make yourself vulnerable in that kind of a way to your spouse or to your family members or even to your friends, what happens from my experience, and this is all anecdotal from what I have encountered, is people will become unsympathetic and moreover disgusted with your inferiority. And they'll start invalidating you and evaluating you and distancing themselves from you and considering you a liability, somebody who needs to be avoided. Or they'll look at you as a fucking mental case. Especially if you say, "I don't like being alive. I would prefer to have never been born." Okay? Now, it's one thing to say that you're depressed, but if you take it to that level where you are insinuating the unalterable exit, then your depression and your ideation, as far as that's concerned, is only going to get worse because you're going to find that nobody really fucking cares about you At least not as much as you thought. They find your emotional detriment to be a nuisance. And like I said, in some cases, it even pisses them off. Where the women will refuse to have sex with you and eventually break up with you, maybe cheat on you. Put a bullet in your head and just fucking get it over with then. You know? So nobody fucking cares. That's been my experience. So from now on, when it comes to my depression, I'm not going to talk about it. Okay? And I kind of recommend you to do the same thing. Because when you make yourself vulnerable and you communicate to people only because you want your suffering to be recognized, and ultimately you want to be pitied, you want sympathy, you crave emotional support. But I'm telling you, when you do that to people, it's just going to make them uncomfortable. Because there's two types of people in this world. You have the depressive and the non-depressive. Okay? Non-depressives hate depressives. They don't want to be around you. Why is that? Because you're basically an energy vampire as far as they're concerned. You ruin the vibe. The subject assumes vibratory equality with their interlocutor. So in a way, as fucked up as it sounds, it ultimately is somewhat selfish on your part, despite your desperation, to take somebody who is in a good mood or a content mood and give them that kind of emotional dump and vulnerability. I promised myself I would never do it, but I did it recently as an experience, as an experiment. Never again. But it taught me a lesson. People don't give a fuck about your depression. They don't give a fuck, ostensibly, that you hate being alive and you might want to unalive yourself. But here's the thing. This is the ironic thing. When it comes to post-unalivement victims and how it affects their family members, of course, they will start crying hysterically. And they will say, how come he never said anything about it? How come he never communicated, asked for help? I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have gave emotional support to prevent this tragedy from happening that has traumatized me. I have lost somebody who is utmost important to me. But that's the thing. That type of sympathy from the non-depressive on one who would take their own life, it's always after the fact. It is always after the fucking fact. And of course, if you brought this to their attention, they would say, no, no, no. I would have been supportive. I would have provided any kind of relief that was at all possible. They'll say this. But the thing is, statistically speaking, it is most likely a lie. Hypothetically, the post-unaliver and the aftermath thereof and the tragedy that it caused. If you were to reverse time and instead of him doing so, he reached out to his family. I promise you, most likely, They just would have became very uncomfortable. They would have gossiped about your terrible mental health, and they would have distanced themselves from you. That's the thing. So when it says, when psychologists tell you, reach out to somebody, with that sad, overly dramatic piano music playing in the background, they say, reach out to somebody. Get the help that you need, get the support that you need. There's people out there who love you. You just have to tell them what's going on. Yeah. From my anecdotal experience doing that recently, I can tell you that that's a horrible fucking idea. And I will never do it again.